to get into the more recent things that the Lord has been showing me without getting too far back, but just talking about what I've entitled concerning our nation, the road ahead. My wife, Donna, and I, this is a visionary experience, interactive experience I had. The state, in the state of Tennessee and in our county, Dixon County, Interstate 40 runs through our county, which runs across the state of Tennessee from Memphis on towards Knoxville and beyond. So anyway, in the experience, I found myself in our SUV, and we were in the twilight of the evening, not quite yet dark, which I believe has symbolism as to our nation, the United States. Reasons why I believe that, and others who know the same thing or more than I know understand what that means. We were on Interstate 40 and had just really gotten on the interstate, and were going not far before we hit major potholes. Some smaller, some very large potholes, so that we had to basically come to a complete stop and then move slowly forward, missing some of the larger potholes and gently going through some of the smaller potholes. The potholes had names in them. And so one of the potholes, the biggest one I saw, had down in it the name National Debt. And so it was so large, our SUV, we went around it. I went to the left of it to get around it. But other potholes, there were, again, numbers of them without getting into all the potholes, but all of it was dealing with issues, governmental issues, particularly over the last 30 or 40 years, that have been undealt with by our government, and not just the federal government, state governments as well. And things I saw people out there at times in the past had taken loose asphalt and thrown it over into the potholes, which did nothing, did not help whatsoever. And I understood that to be governmental activities that have really not addressed the underlying and deepening issues that we're facing as a nation and are going to face. So I could see in front of me that there was somewhere, I'm a civil engineer surveying background, so I have a fairly good eye for distances. It looked to me to be about 100 yards of potholes. And they were from one side of the interstate to the other. There's no way to miss them. You could not miss them. You only had to slow down. I knew that was typology in the language of the Lord of a coming slowdown. There was something the Lord said to me, guys, that I've not repeated like I'm about to, other than in private. The Lord said this audibly to me. He said, aren't you thankful that you were in your SUV? Because we have a Toyota van as well. He said, because Toyota van would not have been able to negotiate these potholes. He said, aren't you glad you were in your SUV? And here's what he said. That's called preparation.
Yes.
And I can elaborate on that, what he means of preparation. Spiritually, of course, but physically. Now, guys, the thing is, I found myself in our SUV. I didn't make a choice about it. But I can tell you guys this. I have been preparing according to what the Lord has shown me physically for years. Years. The storing of food, the storing of water, the storing of other things because of the command of the Lord. And is dealing with me, the Holy Spirit, in the spirit of Joseph. So I say that to us as the Lord spoke to me specifically. It's called preparation. And aren't you glad you were prepared? Because we are.
Yes.
And we were in the experience. So I've not shared that. Y'all would probably know why I've not shared that, because it throws up a lot of people where I'm just going to trust God. Joseph trusted God. And aren't you thankful that Pharaoh empowered him to prepare the nation? God's not saying these things for us to fall back on. I'm just trusting God. Of course we are. But even the ant of Proverbs 6 knows enough to store up food.
Yeah.
And if you go back 100 years or so in this nation, there were no grocery stores like we presently have. And so please hear my heart in what I'm trying to say. That's not to instill fear. It's to help God's people to understand that it's not unspiritual to prepare. Obedience to God's rhemas are critical to us, right? And God is speaking. So don't get into presumption, don't get into fear, but we need to obey the Lord in what he is saying to us by family. So anyway, we creep on through all the potholes until we come to the end. I knew that the 100 yards was representing something in days, 100 yards being 300 feet or thereabouts, representing 300 or so days of at least that long as to the pothole. I've been saying this, the pothole issue is not the big thing that God's been talking about for years. It is not. It comes first. First comes the potholes. Y'all know that shortly after that, the bridge, the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed or was knocked down. The people that were killed were on that bridge working on the potholes. I knew instantly when I heard that it was the Lord again speaking about this issue that is in front of us concerning potholes. And so many other things have been being said about the pothole issues and things coming up. So I'm saying this to say the Lord is making it clear so we won't doubt and move in fear in a way that says, oh, I don't need to prepare. God's got this. That's more fear than it is to prepare. We shouldn't prepare out of fear, but we should not prepare out of fear. Both are true. So my wife and I make it to the end of the potholes, having seen, as again, very many different aspects of the potholes, including foreign relations, all types of things were potholes in our nations, governmental agendas. That was one of the potholes. There were so many things that were these potholes spread out that had not been repaired. And I'm going to say this, generally speaking, are not going to be. They haven't been yet, and it's about to be too late as timing goes. So that was the first component of what I saw as being close, without giving specific times. I believe some of that begins, though, in the latter part of this year. And what I saw that to be, however, along with other things, but what I was shown in that is the Lord showed me that on the 9th. Chris Reed talks about we getting the same. His was a dream, mine was a visionary experience, but it was the same Saturday. He spoke on Sunday, I spoke on Sunday. Mine did not end, because it wasn't a dream. Mine did not end on the 9th. The Lord continued to ask me if I wanted to see further down the road in this nation, right? So as I said yes to him at specific times over the next 2 weeks or more, he would show me down the road in this nation. So moving then past the potholes, there was a good stretch of road for a short while. And then suddenly I was no longer in our SUV. Donna was not with me. I was still on I-40, representing, however, interstate systems. And now it was a darkness of night, and I was in it, that I literally could not see at very much distance whatsoever. And I found myself standing on the banks of what I've termed a deluge. And things had been simply swept away and were being swept away. Bridges were out because of the deluge. And so, though I could not see well, I could see, highlighted by the Lord, debris floating past me in the deluge. I could not see the other bank, but I could see debris floating past me in the deluge. So that I watched as a broken flagpole and the present American flag washed past me and sank in those waters. I watched as well this old, large, dead tree with 3 large branches on it float past me and sink. The branches had executive, legislature, and judicial written on each branch, one on each. And so I could tell by that it's God's showing me the fall of the government. And so I watched as what is the largest food chain store in the nation, sign Kroger, float past me and sink. Watching various different insurances though, type signs float past me and sink. I'm watching as a sign says banks, plural, of America, not singular, plural, wash past me and sink in the deluge, and many other things. Things, honestly, guys, I didn't care to see, but it didn't matter whether I cared to see it or not. Mine was to watch as these things were going on in front of me. There was a great sense, not just sense. When I watched the American flag wash past me and sink, I wept in the experience. It just moved and affected me greatly for many, many reasons, including God's purpose and the men and women in our history who have stood and fought and given their lives or suffered greatly, and now to watch it come to that point. So that's me bemoaning something, but it's just where I'm at in it. And so in the middle of all that going on, the vision stops at that time. And then the Lord, some days later, says to me, do you want to see what's in the water, the spiritual part of this? I'll come back to the other in a moment, but I want to do a full sequence here, if y'all will permit me.
Go ahead.
And so now I'm hearing in the water the turmoil in the water. And guys, it is a rage that has taken hold of parts of this nation. How extensive, I do not know. I hope it's less. I pray it's less, and I am praying, than what I was seeing. But there was a rage, an anger, a bitterness, a resentment, a spirit of murder that took hold of some of the people of our nation that's backing off by me saying some of the people of this nation. Was not everyone, but there was a spirit of it that took hold and gripped this land, this nation, the people in it. And they were looking for ways to turn loose their anger, their rage, their bitterness, their resentment. They were looking for people to turn. Governmental people were particularly targeted. And so it was murder. I could hear men screaming. I heard women screaming. I heard children screaming as they were being murdered. And it went on, and it went on, and it went on. And so Yeah, it's terrifying to me. Not something I want to hear. But in their screaming, they realized as to what was going on, that the thought began to come among them, if we don't stop, everybody's going to die. We're just going to murder each other, and that will be the end. And so they began to cry out for mercy to one another, not to God, but to one another. Didn't stop it. That went on for a while. The desperation of it, I could hear it in their cries. But then they began to cry out to God for mercy. Started with one voice, and then it began to multiply. And they were crying out to God for mercy. And I'm listening to this while looking into the waters. And I hear in the experience, still standing on that bank in the night, watching the deluge, I hear the audible voice of God come from my right front and say to me audibly, "And my mercy will triumph over judgment in your land," he said, and a pronouncement when they cried out to him for mercy. And when he said that, a new day literally broke suddenly. It went from the deepest darkness to a new day. Then usually would tell this before I told the other, but I want to put it in sequence. I could see by the light of the new day, though it was dim still, I could see the other bank across the deluge. And there in front of me was a new flag. It was white in its background. It had a green tree like what is behind you there, Clay. An evergreen tree. An evergreen tree was in the center part of the flag. In the center of the evergreen tree was a white star. Actually, it was white gold star. And written above it in evergreen words was the New Republic, and in evergreen words below it, of America. And then around the perimeter of that flag was gold, but in the gold band, about 5 inches, that's a guess, but pretty good guesstimate, band around the perimeter of the flag were evergreen stars representing the states of the new republic. I tried to count the stars for reasons I talked a little bit about earlier, Clay and Randy, about the angel years ago that came in 2014. It said what he did would come off the flag, right? I'm trying to count. The Lord wouldn't really let me count to get an accurate number. There's somewhere near 30 stars, though, on that new flag. And so above it was a blue and green Gideon, or Guidon is actually what it's called, flag, a small flag, Guidon, a battle type flag. And written on it was concerning the new republic, "We will trust in our God." And so that's what I beheld when the new day dawned. The new day dawned with a new republic. The Lord spoke audibly to me again, and he said, "In the midst of the deluge, I remembered my republic, and I birthed the new republic in the deluge." Stunning, I think, as to what he said. So there's that part. I can go further down the road, but it's totally up to you guys. Beyond then the republic, please bear with me in what I'm about to say. May God help us not to be in fear over this. We no sooner come, the republic, birthed in the deluge, comes up out of the deluge and has a brief respite of peace. And let me tell you how the Lord said it to me in the encounter again. And the spirit of Antichrist saw that Gideon, "We will trust in our God." And he moved immediately to invade us. And this nation was invaded. We came into a third world war. And this time, in this third world war, we will be participants along with other nations of invasion. Now, we've not had that in this nation for some years, right? To the point that I think we can't be, but we're going to be. And so the spirit of Antichrist, you talked about it, Clay. I saw it. I saw new states appear, but they weren't in the republic. And I kept looking at the stars because of what I knew 35 would come off. And I'm looking for 35 on the new flag. And the Lord asked me a direct question audibly. What makes you think that the 35 stars that came off the original flag will come on to the flag of the republic? Ask me that question, correcting me. So I saw not only new states, but they were given over to the spirit of Babylon, and they were given over to the spirit of Antichrist. Yeah. I saw territories form. It wasn't a state. And some states decided just to remain autonomous because they didn't want to be a part of anything. But the states that were under the spirit of Antichrist, listen to me, what I'm about to tell you, became an open door to the spirit of Antichrist coming out of Europe.
Yeah.
And out of Asia and out of Africa, like the old Roman Empire.
Yeah.
And I watched play out in front of us as the Lord told me, the spirit of Antichrist will never allow that flag to be flown in a near republic in this land without attacking you. And let me just go on with this. Fresh with his defeat of Russia, please hear what I'm saying. This ain't a doctrine. I watched it. He moved quickly to come for us. And we fought. And I watched what was said of George Washington's dream, whether that's his dream or not. I watched it play and Randy play out in front of me. We were fighting and we were fighting and we were resisting, but we weren't winning. We were not winning. We were being defeated. We were being overwhelmed. But we were fighting. And how's it a refuge then if it's war? It's a refuge from the dominance and the rulership of the spirit of Antichrist. That's how it's a refuge. It's not a refuge from war because we're going to be in it. Please hear what I'm saying. No false notions in this. We will not face in the new republic peace. We will face war, a world war. And so we were being defeated, overwhelmed, because we'd gone through what we'd gone through in the deluge. And I heard again the audible voice of God speak to me. As he moved, he said, I will save and rescue my republic. And so he moved so that the Antichrist could not take us. And he caused other flashpoints in the world war in other parts of the world. So he had to divert forces away from this area, this land, in order to take on those. And so he was prevented from winning in this land. And so now that's hard news. Let me go on to a little better news. And I watched through the coming of the Lord in the beginning of the millennium. And the new Republic of America came into the millennium. And I watched it as one of the nations in the millennium. And you talk about rejoicing. I was rejoicing watching it as it came in. So it's what you were shown, Clay. This land, this new republic, is like an evergreen tree, brother. That's absolutely right. Even into the millennium, it's not going away again. God's new republic will not go away.
Right.
It will go into the millennium and beyond. So I'll stop there. So It ends beautifully, but it's a battle. It's a war. There's chaos involved. But guys, God gets what he wants in this land. And that's what he corrected me years ago. He said, you're talking about a nation. He said, anytime a land becomes a nation, tyrants can take control of it. He said, I gave this land to be a refuge. That's what he told me. And it can only be that if there's a republic under God, right? We've learned that.
Yeah.
So I'll just stop there. How's that, guys?